is here we go. We're starting now. This is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. It's February 15th, and today is a new moon, solar eclipse in the sign of Aquarius. So this is just a little short video, live video on Facebook that I'm doing today to just cover some of the basics of today's eclipse and to give people a few maybe helpful insights and ideas to play with as we're each experiencing the eclipse in our own individual ways. So first of all, I've said this in this eclipse season already. I've kind of talked a little bit about eclipses in general, so you can look back at some of my previous videos to get a deeper scoop on the meaning of eclipses in general. So just say a few things. So eclipses are pretty normal in astrology. They happen in sets, and they happen as new or full moons are formed in close proximity to the nodes of the moon, which are the intersection places between the moon and the ecliptic. So if you can imagine, let's see if I can do this, you can imagine the ecliptic is like an arc in the sky that's defining the path of the sun. Meanwhile, the moon is sort of snaking around that arc of the sun, going up above it, down below it, and when it intersects the path of the sun, going either down or rising up above it, those crossing points are called the nodes of the moon. And in Indian astrology, in fact, the nodes of the moon, because they create eclipses, were thought of as planets, like shadow planets, because the appearance of the moon or sun being swallowed up by a dark sphere was thought of as the presence of an actual shadowy planet. So the nodes of the moon really have a background sort of esoterically in the history of astrology of being thought of as actual entities, actual forces, and not just, you know, astronomical sort of data. So that's really important. When a new or full moon happens in close enough proximity to one of those crossing intersection points of the ecliptic, we get our eclipses. Again, they come in sets or waves. We get a few at a time. So right now we've been getting sets in Aquarius and Leo. So during Leo season, meaning about the middle of summer, we've been getting, from the northern hemisphere standpoint, we've been getting eclipses. Then from the perspective of the middle of winter, Aquarius, we also get eclipses because the sun is traveling through one of the signs that the nodes are located in, which means that the new or full moons will also constellate around the nodes, and that's when the eclipses happen. And the nodes themselves are always moving backward through the zodiac, and they are moving through every sign in maybe a year and a half or so. They move into another set of signs. So right now they're in Aquarius and Leo. They will be reversing backward into Cancer, the sign prior to Leo, and Capricorn, the sign prior to Aquarius. They'll be doing that in the year ahead. So that's basically your take on the nodes. Now, when a solar eclipse happens, it's always at the new moon. And new moons are, as most people know, a time of new beginnings. So you have the planting of a seed at the new moon. It's a perfect image for it, for conception, for the birth of something in a dark womb-like environment. The moon can't be seen at all. Now, from this standpoint, from the new moon standpoint forward, the light of the moon starts to wax, and the gestation and development and growth of the cycle takes place. So at a new moon solar eclipse, what's happening is, you could say, I like to keep it really simple and just say that it's a very, very powerful form of a new beginning. Compared to the rest of the new moons throughout the year, it's usually the most powerful. So what kind of new beginning comes under a solar eclipse? Well, there's also the phenomenon of eclipsing. So when a light is eclipsed, that can mean a variety of different things. First of all, a light being eclipsed can literally mean that a source of light, clarity, knowledge, health, vitality is being darkened. So eclipses of the sun especially can bring certain kinds of challenges to health, vitality, a clear sense of direction or purpose. And it can be a time of temporary obfuscation, darkness, difficulty. However, it is through just such an eclipsing that usually a kind of new door is opened, a new doorway is opened. Now there's a south node solar eclipse and there's a north node solar eclipse. So for example, we had a north node solar eclipse in Leo at the middle toward the end of August. And that was one that everybody could see. It was a total eclipse here in the United States. Most people could see it. That was with the north node. This one that we're experiencing today is with the south node. So they're really different territory altogether. Now, classically, astrologers said that the north node increased both the good and the bad, and the south node decreased both the good and the bad. And in Indian astrology, something that I actually got to see quite personally and sort of up close when I was in India recently is the view of the nodes in Indian astrology, which to me feels like home. Their view of the nodes in particular, and a lot of other things in astrology, felt really right to me intuitively. Anyway, the north node of the moon, called Rahu in the Indian tradition, is associated with hunger and appetite and desire, and is also associated with the perpetuation of reincarnation. Now, there's some kind of beneficial, auspicious potential things associated with just about anything in astrology, so it's not just to be seen as some unanimously bad or something like that. But one thing we have to be careful about with solar eclipses in a north node position, like when they were constellated around Leo last summer, is the potential to follow our hungers blindly. And there's consequences for that are thought to perpetuate reincarnation, perpetuate, or let's just say, entangle us more deeply in the web of karma. So, you got to be careful of Rahu. There's a whole mythology that goes around the story of the nodes. It's pretty beautiful. I'll hopefully get into that at some point in a different talk. South node, Ketu, or just the tail of the dragon, is about decrease, both the good and the bad. But generally speaking, in Indian astrology, south node is more auspicious. The main reason for this is that for most Indian people, there's a variety of religious traditions in India, right? Quite a diverse place, but they all most of them share moksha in common, liberation from identification with the material, trying to be associated back with the source, the soul, God, etc. So one of the things that keeps us from that is identification with material things. So the south node, though it is related to loss, decline, diminishment, is thought to be auspicious because it's through such things materially that we stand to draw closer to spirit or to the divine. So this eclipse is with the south node in the sign of Aquarius, which means quite simply that this is a solar eclipse that involves the events of eclipsing, which can be difficult. It can be about the eclipsing of light, but it's also offering us something, so there might be diminishment, loss, and eclipsing of light, but there's an opportunity in this eclipse to draw closer to the divine. And that looks different for everybody. It's not like a one-size-fits-all solution or anything like that. But we should be really mindful right now at this time that where there is loss, diminishment, where our expectations are not things aren't turning out as we hoped or wished they would, or we are disappointed with outcomes, to consider that disappointment, diminishment, and loss is also an opportunity to come back to a place of happiness and peace that needs less, that actually has everything that it already needs. So that's the potential of a south node solar eclipse. Now, it's also really important to think about Aquarius a little bit. When the sun is in Aquarius, it's in the sign of Saturn. And the sign of Saturn is contrary or opposite to the place of the sun. So sun is in its own domicile, its own home temple in Leo. Its opposite sign, Aquarius, is the home of Saturn. Saturn takes its home in both Aquarius and Capricorn, the signs that are opposite the sun and the moon, Cancer and Leo. And ancient astrologers said that these planetary contrarieties they're built into the zodiac everywhere. So the sun and the moon take their detriment or in their exile in the signs of Saturn, because Saturn is where darkness reigns. Saturn is ignorance and darkness. It's old age. It's the wisdom of darkness and so forth. But when the luminary is getting eclipsed already in the sign of its exile, in the sign of Saturn, there's also a very particular teaching here. I wrote about this today in my horoscope column, but the basic idea is that, in modern astrology, we do a lot of associating of Aquarius with like the outsider, the person who doesn't fit in or who's very different in some way or marginalized. Well, this is a true association. In ancient astrology, it's not really because of, like in modern astrology, a lot of times we associate that with Uranus as the planetary ruler. But traditionally had more to do with the placement of the sun in Aquarius, which is the sign of Saturn. So the contrariety of the planetary qualities having more to do with that symbolism, you could say. So we're all outsiders, right? None of us belong here in a sense. We all have the sense that we're strangers at different times in our life, that we're marginalized, that we're misunderstood, that we're outcast, that we don't feel at home. And from a spiritual standpoint, this is because, quite literally, this is a temporary home. If you have that belief anyway, I think most people who practice astrology have the belief that you are more than your body, that you have a past that precedes this body and have a future that will come after this body. So yeah, and planet Earth may itself be a place that you're just visiting or that I'm just visiting. So we are not our bodies. We don't know how long we have been here in this planet or how long we'll have to be, right? We're all outsiders in that regard. So we can all relate to this theme of the sun and its exile in the sign of Aquarius if we just take a moment to feel into our true existential situation. Like, who are we really? And this is also an eclipse that provides us with an opportunity to remember our real sort of constitutional place in reality. And from that place, there's this solar eclipse is coming in close conjunction with Mercury, right? So Mercury is like right there with this, within a degree or two of the solar eclipse today. So we have eclipsing of light, of loss and diminishment, but also the beginning of something. And then Mercury is right by. Well, what does Mercury represent? Well, Mercury is common. Mercury can be feminine, it can be masculine. Mercury can be a daytime star or a nighttime star. Mercury is not classically associated with a gender. Mercury's qualities elementally can sort of change depending on what environment it's in. So Mercury is, Hermes, Mercury is a friend to all. And so this new moon, this new beginning that might involve some of the difficult themes we've been discussing, also is an opportunity to find a friend or some kind of ally or help in the midst of our situations in life. Like, most of us are looking for some place to call home, some place to feel safe, some place to feel like we belong or like we're understood. And having Mercury right in the mix of a new moon solar eclipse provides us with an opportunity to find support and understanding from somebody or something, to find some kind of common outlet for reaching a broader audience, or for relating to people who are different than ourselves. It's a wonderful opportunity to find help or support in life in unlikely places. And the whole reason for this unlikeliness is because we're, again, talking about the sun and the sign of its exile. So there's this real signature in this eclipse that has, in my opinion, something to do with finding an ally, finding support in the midst of maybe feeling like an outsider, or like we don't belong, or like there's we're dealing with something that's challenging. So that's one thing that I feel, sort of one teaching that I feel like is a part of this eclipse. But with Mercury involved in the new moon solar eclipse, there's some other things to look for, like anything surrounding communication, technology, how you communicate with others, how you communicate yourself, writing, learning, education. So you can look for those themes as well right now, perhaps playing an important role in your life. Like, you know, you might, it's right now, it could be a time to simplify, to get rid of things, to purge, to reprioritize your time or energy. But you may also find that there are interesting forms of support available to you right now to help you do so. So that's the nice thing about having Mercury in the mix. I would say, like, to draw an analogy, it's sort of like if you may feel right now at a certain sense like, you know, you're a stranger in a place that's very foreign or distant or different from what you're used to, or you don't feel like you're totally at home in something. And with Mercury in the mix of this new moon, it's sort of like suddenly somebody gives you, you know, like a Lonely Planet guide to the country that you're in, and maybe a little book or a device that allows you to translate the foreign language that you don't know. So there's some very interesting mercurial form of support coming through in this moment. So that's just something to think about as well. I think that's probably these are the main things that I wanted to share. Check the Aquarius ruled area of your chart. If you use whole sign houses, check that area. If you don't use whole sign houses, then look at about the 27th degree of Aquarius in your chart, what house that falls in, and you will find the topics that are really pertinent right now. Claire says Mercury would also give voice to the young, amplify the message of support. I like that. That's an interesting take. Yeah. It's also quite normal, by the way, because we're in eclipse season, and we also had a lunar eclipse in Leo. Things with fathers are really big right now, right? Because the paternal sign of Leo just experienced a lunar eclipse. So a lot of karma around dads and fathers and paternity and men and things like that with the sun, you could say, are up right now. Solar eclipse in solar eclipse in Aquarius in the sign of Saturn is also potentially about men or fathers or elders, elderly figures in our life. Saturn ruled sign, Saturn referring to age and things like that. So Eva says, my moon is at 27 degrees of Aquarius, second house. Right. So you could look for things related to your things related to finances, probably in that regard, being really pertinent right now. There might be some experience of loss, for example, which is a little challenging, but the loss or diminishment on some level may also lead to an increased sense of emotional or spiritual liberation, and possibly some new opportunities or unexpected allies that are available to you right now as well. That's how I would be looking at that. If anybody else has any questions about the placement in your chart or anything else, feel free to ask. I'm said about everything that I want to say at this point. Dad was a Leo and recently passed. I'm sorry to hear that, Sherry. That's difficult. Yeah, I got back from India, and my father was hospitalized with some blood clots, life-threatening blood clots. So he's dealing with that right now. He's a Leo moon that had Leo moon that received the lunar eclipse. 27 Aquarius is also the location of the moon in the U.S. Sibley chart. Okay, right. So, yeah, that's interesting. We have to see what that looks like. Nice. Okay. Well, remember, it's even though it's a new moon and a solar eclipse, and there's a certain kind of an excitement or enthusiasm in the air. It's really important on eclipses in particular to stay low, to be easy, to rest and not exert yourself. So be mindful of that. What do I think about the eclipse transiting the 12th? Well, the 12th house solar eclipse is challenging, right? Because that's a place of loss. The 12th is a place of sometimes you loss or having to surrender to things that are quite overwhelming. So there's obviously, again, with the 12th normally, but also with the South Node solar eclipse in the 12th, maybe the opportunity for a deeper level of surrender to the divine, but probably involving some element of loss or exposure to suffering in the world or things like that. Yeah. Grief and loss with the Florida shootings. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, eclipse season is, that's a good way of a good story to recall, right? That there's loss on a solar eclipse. The light is eclipsed, but with the South Node, there's an opportunity to draw closer to the truth. And one would hope that something like the Florida shootings that just occurred, though they are tragic, would help more people with the power to effect change in the politic would draw closer to the truth. I mean, that's the hope. But that's the basic meaning of a sort of an eclipse with Ketu, which is more about the kinds of loss that provide opportunities for spiritual growth. So, yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to end it here. I hope you all have a beautiful day. You can also read my horoscope of the day for more information. I wrote up a pretty good horoscope talking about that theme of being an exile, being a wanderer. How do we act when we're a wanderer? The I Ching, the 56th hexagram, says we're supposed to remain humble. Remember that we're here as visitors. And when we act humbly and we recognize our need for shelter as shelter, safety, as visitors in this strange place, that we are provided for, and we meet with unexpected help. So that's how I did that I Ching reading this morning to connect to the solar eclipse, and that was the reading that I got back. So I hope this helps everybody. You guys have a beautiful day, and we'll see you again soon.